Back when I started using GameMaker in the late Triassic, one of the most interesting things I had to figure out how to do for the first time was making NPCs talk to you. Now, if you clicked on this video, I'm sure you know what that looks like, and I don't have to describe it to you, but I'm going to show some examples on screen anyway because creating montages is fun. Anyway, the question of how to do that in GameMaker remains ever popular because, as it turns out, being able to talk to NPCs is something that you kinda need to do in games pretty often. So without further ado, hello all the crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and let's talk about how to create NPC dialogue in GameMaker. Or alternatively, how to create a text engine, how to create a cutscene system in GameMaker, how to create an Undertale dialogue text rendering framework like the one that Pokémon has with the cherry on top. There are a million different names that people use to refer to this kind of thing. I don't really care what you want to call it, we're going to learn how to do it today. By the way, if the fact that each and every one of the examples that I'm showing on screen right now aren't vastly different from each other isn't tipping you off, there are a million ways to accomplish this in games. And I don't want anyone to come away from this video thinking that this is the only way to make NPCs talk to you. This is just the method that I consider to be simplest and an easy way to get something like NPC dialogue working without having to do a bunch of engineering behind the scenes first. I would like to make more videos on NPC dialogue in the future, but not right now. So, what we've got here right now is my sample project. This is a very simple sample project. You can walk around, you're a duck. Can't talk to the NPCs yet, but you will be able to in about 10 minutes. Right, so let's break this problem down into the essential parts. Firstly, we're going to need to make the player be able to detect if you hit a key on the keyboard or a button on the gamepad. I'm just going to go with the spacebar for now because it's simple. And the player needs to detect if there is an NPC nearby or in front of them. Secondly, the NPCs are going to actually need text that they can say when you hit the spacebar nearby them. Thirdly, we're going to need to be able to draw that text on the screen. And finally, the player is going to need to freeze in place while there's text on the screen until they hit the spacebar again, in which case the text will go away and you'll be able to continue. Again, there's a million different ways that you can handle NPC dialogue. Some games allow you to wander around freely in the middle of conversation. I think most people would consider it a little bit rude if they were talking to you and you just shoved off in some other random direction.
Hey.
What can I do?
Piper.
Something you need?
So we're not going to be doing that, but feel free to imagine different ways of changing the rules so that you can adapt this to different kinds of games. So the first thing that we're going to do is the first step. We're going to wait until the player hits the spacebar, and if the player hits the spacebar, then we're going to check if there's an NPC nearby who we can talk to. I'm going to go into the player step event. This is a very bog standard player step event. If you've ever worked on a GameMaker game for more than about 5 minutes, you've probably written something like this. Up, down, left, right. Some controls over animation frames and whatnot. I'm going to go to the bottom of this and I'm going to say if keyboard check vk_space. I'm going to specifically use the keyboard check pressed function for this because you probably only want to check for player input like this when you actually press the spacebar and not while you're holding it continuously. Now, for working out if there's an NPC nearby, GameMaker has a bunch of different collision checking functions. It's honestly kind of a pain. A lot of them do similar but not quite the same things. The one that I'm going to use here is instance place, and this is going to be a function which is going to take 3 arguments, an X position, a Y position, and an object that you want to check for collisions with. In my case, that's going to be obj walkie. Yes, I really named it that. I'm not good at naming things, leave me alone. This instance place function is going to check for with the, like the collision shape of the object that's calling it. So in this code here, since I'm writing this in the player step event, it's going to check for a collision using the player's collision mask with instances of obj_walkie, and if it detects the collision there, it's going to return the instance ID of the object that it finds, and we can say that to a variable. If it doesn't detect a collision with anyone, it's going to return no one instead, which is basically GameMaker's null value, or one of them anyway. And we can say if who is here is not equal to no one. Then to check that this is working, we can just say like show message someone's here. All right. So if I run the game, if I hit the spacebar all the way down off in the middle of the room, nothing happens. If I hit the spacebar, get back here, mister. If I hit the spacebar when I'm overlapping an NPC, it's going to pop up a message box saying someone's here. Alright, great. We've made something happen. Let's see. Like a good computer scientist, I'm going to commit my changes to my code here. Alright. Promoting good habits, cool. By the way, this is checking if there is a collision with one of these NPCs exactly overlapping the player. Usually in a game you would check if the NPC is in front of the player instead. That's going to involve a little bit more math, which I don't feel like doing right now. So right now I'm going to leave it for checking for overlaps with the player, and later on in the video I'll do a little bit of math to make this work. Let's see. What do I want to do next? So the next thing that we should probably do is we should probably go into the NPCs and make sure they actually have something to say when you talk to them. So we can do that by just defining a variable. I'm going to call it text in the create event of the NPC, and this can just be a string of text. What do I want you to say? How about... Why is there a D in fridge but not in refrigerator? Ask me important questions. So we're going to define a variable in the NPC's create event, and when we do this, we'll be able to access it from the player's step event when we hit the spacebar and find an NPC by just let's say show message who is here .text, and this is going to allow us to show the contents of the NPC's text variable in the message box instead. Alright, small change, not that exciting. Excellent. So if you wanted to, like, be a contrarian or whatever, you could totally just use these show message boxes as your NPC dialogue boxes and call it a day. I am gonna go out on a limb and say most people don't want their games to look like that. Show message is really kind of a debugging function anyway. You're not really intended to use it in, like, production games. So instead, we're actually going to draw text on the screen, like, nicely. To do that, I'm going to need to do a little bit more setup in the player's various events. So in the player's create event, let me go and define a few more variables. I'm going to say, let's make one variable called current text. I can initialize that to an empty string. We'll set that to some value later. And currently, as an adverb talking, I'm going to initialize that to false. Alright, so going back to the player's step event, instead of just showing a message box, when you hit the spacebar and when you're, like, overlapping an NPC, we can set our current text variable to who is here.text, and we can set our currently talking variable to true. So this is going to allow the player to keep track of who they are talking to when you hit the spacebar. And now, armed with this knowledge, we can go into the draw GUI event. So this is going to be text that's drawn, like, outside the game world, like on top of the game world rather. And let me full screen this too while I'm here. Let's make this a little nicer. Let's go into the draw GUI event of the player, and if currently talking is true, then we can draw some things on the screen. So I'm going to just make this super basic right now, and it's going to be a white text box with black text on top of it, and it's going to be at the bottom of the screen. You can obviously dress this up however you want. You can use different colors. You can use a sprite, a 9-slice sprite or something like that to draw the text box. You can position it somewhere else on the screen if you'd like. But since I'm just going to draw a rectangle at the bottom of the screen, let's say, let's define a few coordinates first just to make our lives easier. X1 is going to be 0, our Y1 is going to be window get height minus, let's make it 160 pixels tall. For X2 is going to be window get width, and our Y2 is going to be window get height. And this is going to be a set of coordinates for the upper left and bottom right of the rectangle that we're going to draw. So we can draw rectangle at position X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Outline only, let's make that false because we'd like this to be a filled rectangle, and draw set color, C underscore black, no, C underscore white, and that's going to draw us a filled white rectangle. Next, I would like to draw the text inside the rectangle somewhere, so let's just define a few more variables. Let's call them text x, which can equal x1 plus 32, and text y equals y1 plus 32. This is going to offset our text 32 pixels from the upper left corner of the of that rectangle. Let's draw set color C_black. I like how I typed black when I said white up here for the background rectangle, and then I did the exact opposite down here. Draw set color C black. Draw text at text_x text_y, and the string can be current text. So this is going to allow us to walk up to an NPC, hit the spacebar, and now when we do that, there is now a white rectangle and a black text being drawn on top of that at the bottom of the screen. All right. So a few problems here. Some of these problems are a little bit obvious. I can walk around, and the NPCs can also keep walking around while this text box is down there, which is, again, maybe just a little bit rude. There's also the problem of there's no way right now to make this text go away, which is a little bit unfortunate. So which one of those do I want to solve first? First, I'm going to make a commit, because let's encourage some good computer science habits here. Alright. Source control is wonderful. First, let's talk about the problem of there's no way to make this text box go away. And if I wanted to, let's say when you hit the spacebar when there's a text box on the screen, we can simply, before we check for like who is here, we can say if currently talking equals. Actually, that needs to be equals false, because that's a true or false variable. Else we can do something else. And if you are not currently talking, you may be permitted to talk to someone like this. And if you are currently talking to someone, we can just set currently talking to false, and that is going to make the text box go away. So that's an easy, like, 2-line fix. Let's talk to you. Let's hit the spacebar again, and we can untalk to you. Alright, cool. And we can do it again. The second problem is going to have a similar solution to this, but it's going to be a little bit more involved. So the problem of you can walk around when talking to people. I'm going to take care of that by scrolling up in the player step event a little bit and just checking if currently talking equals false before we actually check for keyboard input. Over here, let's see. If you're currently not talking to anyone, you can, check for the arrow keys, and then if you are, you can not check for the arrow keys. And that's going to lock the player in place when we talk to an NPC, but NPCs themselves are still going to be allowed to walk around. I want to say there's like a 10-second timer. Like, every 10 seconds or so, there's a chance of an NPC walking in a random direction like this. And, yeah, I can't go anywhere until I hit the spacebar, but you can, so let's take care of that. That's going to look similar in the way that I've set this up. So let's just go into the NPC step event. And we can check if the NPC is... when the NPC is walking around, we can check if obj player dot currently talking equals false. And if you're not currently talking to anyone, you can just walk around like this. And if you are currently talking, you won't be able to do anything. So let's just make sure that works. Hello. I can't move. If we wait a couple seconds, you won't be able to move either. That's great. No wandering off in the middle of a conversation. So this is shaping up pretty well. There's a few more enhancements that we might want to make. For example, right now, every NPC in the game is going to say the exact same thing. It doesn't matter who I talk to. They're all going to say the same line about the refrigerator. So, if I wanted to give each of the NPCs some custom text, and I can make use of the GameMaker creation code feature. And creation code is code which runs, basically, when you enter a room, each instance will run their creation code after their create event runs, and this means that I can say, like, text equals something else for this NPC over here, and it will overwrite the value that was set in the actual create event. So, what would be another good question? How about... this guy over here can wonder about parking on driveways and driving on parkways. And I'll leave this guy over here as the default, and this one down at the bottom. I'll give you some creation code, and this one can say text equals... Wonderful. Let's see. That's all I need to do now. So if I run the game now, every NPC will say something different. You, I believe, are the refrigerator NPC. Okay. You over here are the, like, the rules of the road NPC. And you over here are going to be talking about farting. As one does. Right, so this is shaping up to look pretty good. There are a couple of other things that I'd like to add here. One is, in most of the examples that I showed at the beginning of the video, the text wasn't displayed all at once, but it scrolled out nicely over time. And, that's, people generally refer to that as, like, typewriter text or something along those lines. And that is, fairly simple to add. If I were to go back to the player's create event, I can say, let's define a third variable that's going to be current text index, and I can assign that, I can initialize that to 0. Current text index is going to keep track of basically the last letter that appeared when you're going to scroll out text over time. If I were to go over to the draw a GUI event and where we draw our text, if I were to, instead of just drawing the string of text itself, let's draw a string copy, which is a function which will return part of a string. Starting from index, I'm going to say index 1, and the count can be current text index. If you've used other programming languages, this is basically your substring function. GameMaker strings are 1 indexed. It's annoying. This may be changing in the future when GameMaker's new runtime comes out, but for the time being, GameMaker strings are 1 indexed. And our current text index can control the number of characters that we draw. If you just leave it like this, nothing will ever be drawn because this is set to 0 and it's never, like, increased anywhere. So let's also say current text index plus plus. Right after that, this will increment the current text value by 1 every single frame. If I run this, it's going to work properly exactly once, and then after that, it'll just draw the text all at once because we're never resetting that anywhere. And we can see that this looks alright. When I talk to you the first time, the text scrolls out, and if I talk to you again, the text just appears all at once because, again, this is never being reset anywhere. So if we were to do that, we could just come down when we say who is talking or who is here or whatever. We can reset current text index to 0. And now when I run the game, we are going to have some nice typewriter text coming out, character by character, 1 character per frame, and it will work whenever I talk to someone. Okay? Let's see. I should probably commit that change. Like that. Another common thing that you might want to do is give each of these NPCs more than 1 possible lines of text that they can actually say. Right now, our NPCs can only say 1 line, and then, like, it'll be turned on when you talk to them, and it'll be turned off when you hit the spacebar again. If you want NPCs to be able to say more than 1 thing, you probably would rather make this an array. You would want to make this text variable an array instead of a single value. And I feel like I should actually, like, answer these questions here if I don't want to get a million people in the comments trying to explain to me the linguistic quirks of English that makes, like, the D when you pronounce the word fridge kind of implied. And so that it comes out in the spelling of, like, the colloquial term. That would be the smart thing to do, but I think I'll go with instead something more like... something more along the lines of this. Alright? So after this, we will, of course, want to go into the room, into the creation code, and we should probably also change all of these guys. Lines of dialogue to be arrays. I guess we'll give them all 2 lines of text that they'll say. The answer to this, by the way, is that Parkway, in case anyone was curious, doesn't derive from, like, park as in to, like, have your car go nowhere, but instead it is derived from, like, park as in, like, a nice place where people go to hang out. As in, like, national park. But because we can't pack too much information into 1 video, let's instead have you say... as someone who's lived in New Jersey my whole life, I think I'm qualified to make this assertion. And lastly, this NPC down here. What do I want your next line to be? For the record, I don't know the answer to this question. I'm going to guess that you get lighter because hydrogen sulfide is heavier than air, and never mind. Alright, so each of these NPCs has now 2 lines that they'll say instead of 1. And we need to make sure that the game knows what to do with that. If I just run the game now, it won't really behave correctly. So if I go up and talk to you, the game is going to, like, sort of draw text, but it's going to draw them as, like, a stringified array, which doesn't really look great. So now instead of treating the whoishere.text as a single string variable, we're going to need to treat this as an array. And I'm going to go back to the player's create event, and let's define 2 more variables. Currently, actually, you know what? I'll just define 1. Current text line number can be initialized to 0. And currently talking, instead of making this a true/false, I'm going to initialize this to no one, and this currently talking value is going to keep track of the instance ID of the NPC who you just talked to. So if I go back to the step event, firstly, when you talk to an NPC for the first time, we can set current line number equal to 0, and we can also set currently talking to, instead of a true/false again, we can set that to who is here. Whenever we check for currently talking equals false, in various places, we can instead check if this equals no one. We can set it back to no one when we want to turn this off. And up here, where we were checking for it to, like, lock off player movement, we can say, we can check if this equals no one. And I think the last place in which I'll want to do this is in obj_walkie step event. Because they're doing basically the same thing. And let's see, I'll also want to set current text equal to whoishere .text index 0, because that's going to be the first item in the array. So if I run this now, we'll be basically back to where we were about 5 minutes ago. If I were to walk up to you and hit the spacebar, we will not do anything. And if I release the spacebar, if I hit the spacebar again, we'll walk away. What am I missing? Oh, you know what? I missed one other instance of currently talking being a boolean. I need to check in the draw GUI event of the player if that's not equal to no one. All right. So now if I run the game, we'll be basically back to where we were 5 minutes ago, and we'll just be drawing 1 line at a time. But you won't actually be able to display any of the other lines that you've got. To do that, down here on line 53, where we would have just disabled the text box by setting currently talking to no one. We'll instead want to, if there are more lines of text to display, we'll want to move along and we'll want to display them, and we'll only want to set currently talking to no one if there's no more text. And to do that, we can say if current text line number is less than the array length of whoishere.text, not whoishere.text, of currently talking.text, -1, then we'll want to display the next line. Else, if you've hit the last line, let's move this in here. If you've hit the last line, that's when you want to disable currently talking. So let's say there are 2 lines of text, so the array length of this is going to be 2. If you're on the last line, current text line number will have an index of 1, because arrays are indexed from 0. Unlike strings in GameMaker, fun. And if current text line number is less than 1 minus the array length, or the array length minus 1 rather, then we will want to increase this by 1. We will want to set current text equal to whoishere.text index current text line number, and we will, I keep doing that, currently talking text, because this variable here is local to this block of code and it won't exist in here, and if you try to access it outside, it'll just crash because the variable hasn't been set to anything. where was I? We'll also want to set current text index equal to 0 so that the typewriter effect is reset on the second line. All right, so let's go walk up to you. I'm not close enough, apparently. First line, second line. All right. You can display both lines of text. You come back here. Why is everyone running away from me? First line. Second line. Apparently, I forgot to capitalize the O at the beginning of that sentence. Down here. First line. Second line. Okay, so that's basic text interaction. How much more do I feel like doing here? So I said that I would check if the NPC is actually in front of the player and not, like, on top of them or behind them or whatever. So I guess I'll do that. There are obviously other things that you can do here, but I don't want this video to go on forever, and my voice is starting to go, so I'm gonna need to stop soon. This is like my 4th time recording this video because I didn't like how it came out the first couple of times. Before we do anything else, let's commit a change. So this is now... NPCs can send more than one line of text. I think there was a spelling error in there because I saw red squiggles, but... yeah, checking if there's someone in front of you. This is where trigonometry is going to enter the picture. There's 2 options here. There are the length-dir functions. Length-dir x and length-dir y. There's also other options for sine and cosine, which is, really all the length-dir functions in GameMaker do is, like, hide away the sine and cosine functions from you. I would rather just use sine and cosine for this because I know how they work and I don't have to think about it, but a lot of beginners in GameMaker are more inclined to use the length-dir functions, so I guess I'm going to use that in this example. If you are friends with sine and cosine, feel free to do that instead. But let's make this work. So instead of checking for the exact x and y, like, of the player's position in the game world, we're instead going to need to check for some direction in front of them. In this example here, I've kind of made up my own, like, direction variable, in which case it's going to be basically 0 is to the right, 1 is up, 2 is to the left, and 3 is down. It's basically like the angle in, like, screen coordinates divided by 90. In hindsight, I probably could have made this simpler, but depending on how you control, like, the animation direction or whatever in your game, you might use the direction variable, which is built in. You might use the image angle variable, which is built in. Some people use those. Some people make up their own. Let's see. I'm going to define, like, let's say check x is going to equal length-dir x. The length is going to be the distance in a certain direction. So let's say if we want to, like, check 32 pixels in front of the player or whatever, which I think is one sprite width, and our direction can be anim direction, in my case, multiplied by 90. Again, feel free to just use, like, the built-in GameMaker direction variable or image angle variable or whatever the case may be. And I'd also like to add the player's current x on top of that. And var check y is going to be length-dir y. 32, the same angle as the x, and we're going to add that to the y. And now instead of checking for instance place, just our x and y coordinate, we can check instance place, check x, check y. And that will allow us to check for if there's an NPC standing in front of us, like this, but not if we're, like, standing on top of them or facing away from them or something like that. Alright? Why are you... Please. Alright, so you're standing in front of me. If I were to stand, like, here, I can't talk to you. Now I can because you walked in front of me. And, you could refine this a little bit so that you can't talk to an NPC who's, like, standing, like, diagonally to you or something, but that is, well outside the scope of this video. This, by the way, is analogous to 32 times the cosine of the angle. Or really the degree cosine of the angle, because the regular sine and cosine are in radians. And this one here is negative 32. Negative 32 times the degree sine of the angle. Because you have to, like, negate the sine calculation when you do angles on things and with things in the game world, and the length-dir y function just takes care of that for you. Alright. Is that it? I think that's gonna do it. Like I said, there's a million other things that you can do with making NPCs talk to you in games. Some logical next steps that you might want to try on your own is, like, it's not uncommon in games when you talk to an NPC to have, like, a portrait of the NPC appear in the text box next to the text. And you can do that pretty easily. With this system, you just have to add a few more values to, like, the NPC, like, where you define the text. Same thing if you want to, like, automatically display, like, the speaker's name on top of the text box or whatever. Some more involved features of NPC text might include, if you want branching dialogue choices like yes, no, have something happen depending on which one the player chooses or, like, how much money the player has. That is doable with this system, but it's a lot more complicated, and once you start getting into that is when I might recommend looking into some other solutions with a little bit more engineering grunt behind them. The same applies if you want to, like, color text or do fancy text effects or things like that. When you're just using GameMaker's draw text function, you don't really get text formatting, but if you need text effects, you might consider looking into something like Scribble. What else is there? So, it's generally considered to be a good idea when your text has finished scrolling out, something like this, to, like, draw a press space to continue or press A to continue or something prompt in the corner of the text box, just so that the player knows that, like, they can do something and that they don't have to keep waiting. Definitely not within the scope of this video. If you've been able to follow along so far, I'm sure you can figure out how to do that. And then, of course, there's the matter of just making this whole thing a little bit prettier. A white rectangle with black text on it isn't, like, it's functional, but it's not, like, anything to write home about. By all means, even if you don't need anything like branching text or complicated cutscene scripting commands or anything like that, by all means, feel free to take this and just, like, make it look better. Because this all looks like it was designed by a programmer. And in fact, it was. So, that's it for me. My name is Michael. I like Wizards and Dragons and making games. If you want the sample project here, look for the GitHub repository down in the description of the video. I like to post all kinds of videos on GameMaker. I like weird 3D stuff and weird shader stuff, but sometimes I also just post videos on other things whenever I feel like it. So if you're interested in any of this, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the examples I showed at the beginning of the video, which is the game that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, VitroV, Squarecrow, Spy Die Games, Manta Ray, GameMaker, Edward Holt, and DJ Gibbles for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.